any cyclist in this country, I think, or certainly the majority of people, will know that this is Andy Wilkinson that we're talking to here. Legendary long distance time trialist, Land's End to John O'Groats, and just recently broke his own 24-hour competition record. It's an amazing achievement. Andy, thanks ever so much for talking to me. Very, very much appreciated. I consider it a privilege. So, yeah, really very, very grateful to you. So we've got to start with last weekend, really. I did see a YouTube video of you at the end of the race, and you look very different to the way you look now. You look completely spent. You must have been delighted with the result, but just how did you feel at the end of it? The end of it all.
I felt pretty rough, to be honest. But I think people said before, when they see you riding these long distance races, quite often right up till the end, you look fine when you're cycling. You know, people see you whizzing along at 25 mile an hour and think, you know, it all looks so almost effortless. But in reality, you know, you're actually suffering really badly, and they're often shocked when you stop and suddenly they think, wow, you know, it's they can then see just how debilitating the whole thing's been. But it, for the last 6 hours, I was really suffering, more so than perhaps I've done in some of the other 24s I've ridden. I really found we started quick in this 24, for better or for worse, and it took its toll in the second half of the race, and I struggled with my back. I also struggled with my back, really. So certainly for the last 6 hours, I felt that I was right up against it, really.
Yeah. You couldn't actually walk at the end of it. From where I saw a little clip, you didn't actually seem to be. I thought you'd collapsed. I know Jill looked terribly concerned.
Yeah, no, I couldn't walk. I couldn't support myself. In the last 6 hours, I couldn't take my hands off the bars to rest my back, because my back wasn't strong enough to actually support my weight without my arms. So I couldn't walk. My knees were also really sore. So I think once you stop, everything just goes into spasm, really, and you know, it's hopeless. All those core muscles which I'd spent so long working on to prepare them for this kind of event, you know, were just trashed. They were exhausted, and they'd all contracted, and it's your whole body's involved in these things, and that's why you get so tired. Your whole body just gets completely exhausted, every muscle.
Yeah, it was an absolutely staggering achievement. I think was it 541 miles you've set the new.
Yeah, at the moment the official mileage is 541.17. That's the organisers give me that mileage as the official mileage. I think it'll probably need ratifying by the CTT. They might have to remeasure the course just to be certain that that's absolutely it. But for the moment, that's the official mileage.
But definitely a new record.
Yes, I think, yeah, it will be a new record.
So you must have taken about 17 miles off your previous record, or added 17 miles to your previous record. But how many years were there between the records?
Well, it was 1997 when I set the existing record, the previous record.
So that's 14 years?
Yeah.
How do you improve by 17 miles being 14 years older? What have you been doing in the meantime?
Well, better kit is one big thing, you know, better equipment. You know, although I understood in 1997 just how important the aerodynamic sort of issues were, I didn't understand quite as well as I do now. And the kit we've used this year, although people might look at the bike we used and think it's a bit odd and looks a bit antiquated even, perhaps, it was actually aerodynamically far superior probably to the bike I used. When we used a really great looking bike in '97, it was a monocoque carbon frame, but I only used V-section wheels at the time. I wasn't sure about using a disc for that distance. These days I have no qualms about it at all, but at that time I was a bit wary about using a disc wheel, and I didn't want to use a very deep section V front in case it was windy, and I felt that might make it quite tiring to ride. So the wheel setup was probably considerably inferior in 97, and also no helmet. I started with a helmet on in 97 actually, but it wasn't a particularly comfortable thing to wear, and after only about 20 miles I threw it off and threw it to my helpers and said, you know, I'd feel happy without it. So, and of course now we realise that the helmets are critical really to improve the aerodynamic sort of profile, and we didn't quite understand just how important they were then, so, or I didn't. So, yeah, technically I was better equipped this time, and with a bit more experience again with, although my basic dietary intake was very similar really to 97, we've refined it a little bit since then, just a bit more experience, a bit more care put into the technical nutritional requirements. So we've just nailed it to the floor a bit better this time, I think.
Right.
And I think the training, I mean, I've said this lots of times, at the time people felt that there must have been a great input into that 24 hour. To do 525, people felt there must have been an amazing training thing going on for it, which no one knew about at the time, but in fact there wasn't. It was, you know, it was a most unlikely 24 hour performance, because that year I was meant to be a prosciutto. In 96 I'd set all those competition records in the best British all-rounder, and that in turn came after a record attempt from Land's End to John O'Groats on board a recumbent bicycle. So that was a sort of amazing year, 96 really. And 97 I decided to just change direction completely, and see if I could become a world-class prosciutto even, potentially, which was a bit of a crazy thing to do in a way, but I just needed a different challenge, and I always felt that pursuit was something that I should have done when I was younger. Right. I never grasped the nettle really, but it didn't go well. I mean, looking back, you know, I think I'd have probably been better doing my own thing to a degree. I accepted the conventional wisdom of the time. I knew I needed some help from outside to organise things, so I joined the Adidas Cycon team, which was sort of satellite team that Chris Bullman supported, and so it was the first time I'd not been in the Ports and Light Wheelers, racing for Ports and Light Wheelers colours, and it was the only time in my career I ever have done. But I accepted that I needed that outside assistance from an organised team. So I also accepted the conventional wisdom of training hard on the road, doing road races early season as part of preparation for pursuiting. So I was back to road racing again, like I'd done in the 80s, and I didn't ever want to go back to road racing really. I had no desire to go back to road racing, but the lads in the team felt that that was, you know, a sensible thing to do. So I was a bit of a fish out of water really. You know, I could compete on the road. I wasn't getting dropped, but I wasn't performing at the level that I really wanted to do, and I just didn't find it. I didn't find it rewarding at all.
Right.
So we spent the early season of '97 travelling all around the country. My job was really to assist the younger riders in the team, be a strong team man really. And I did do some useful work, which I'm grateful for, because, you know, largely that year was a disaster, but I did help the lads occasionally quite usefully. But the whole pursuiting thing was meant to suddenly kick in after the early season, when we'd do some specialist track work and hopefully put in a time that would give me some chance of getting to the World Cup events that summer. But it was a disaster. I never put anything like the time in that was needed, and motivationally I was at a low ebb. It was as close as I've ever come to being sort of a bit depressed really that year. So by midsummer, the season had collapsed around me really. I'd performed woefully at the National 25 Championships. I'd not put any kind of performances in which would suggest that I'd be a useful pursuiter in any way. And I was just I was at an all-time low. So I travelled to a time trial that year with Paul, who helped me in the 24 just last week, and Jim, Paul Histon and Jim Turner. And it was the old team from 90 that we'd done loads of stuff before this together. And we got together to go and ride a time trial. It was one of the Circuit Series races that year. I actually ended up winning the Circuit Series that year, bizarrely. But we went to a time trial and I won the time trial, which was a bit odd because I wasn't really riding that well at the time, but I was probably just a bit lucky. I think it was wet in a technical circuit. And so we won the time trial, and as we were coming back, the lads said, well, what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do this year? And I said to Jim and Paul, you know what? The only thing I can think of doing which would help me mentally is just go back to something I know that I can do. And I said, I'm thinking about a 24. And they were saying, no, you can't. You know, I hadn't been training. I'd been at such a low ebb that I wasn't really that fit. I put weight on. I was basically unfit, although I'd had a lot of early season training and base miles from the road racing. I hadn't, in the last month, I'd done very little, and I was just really demotivated by everything. But I just thought, I can do a 24. I know I can do a 24, and I need something to just give me some self-confidence back. So, despite the lads that I knew so well saying, you know, that's a bit dodgy, I spoke to my team and they said basically, well, the rest of the year's been a disaster, so if that's what you want to do, you know, just go ahead. So they sort of gave me the okay to do it, and probably shaking their heads in dismay at the same time. And I just went off, and within, you know, I only had a few weeks before the race, so I had no chance to do any real specific training. I may have done one, I can't remember exactly what I did, I may have done one long training ride, and just decided, right, that's it, and we got everything together, put a plan together, and got ourselves off on the 24 start line, and so that's how it happened in '97. There was no plan, no specific training or anything, and that result was a result of mental determination to grab something back from what had been a disastrous year, really.
Right. So you got back to from quite a dark place, really. But got back to your roots, and that really
it helped.
lifted you up again.
Even the team had to laugh afterwards, because that result in the National 24, that was the time when the cycling magazine still had some interest in time trialling. And, they actually, you know, there was a big spread in the comic pictures and a big story and everything. Yeah. And the Adidas team had to admit laughingly that they got more publicity out of the National 24 than they got out of almost anything they did that year. So it wasn't really what they intended, but it did have its uses.
Right.